Is it safe to let AI put your kids to bed? Find out on today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by the bestseller ChatGPT Profits. This book is the missing instruction manual to get you up and running with ChatGPT in a matter of minutes. As a special gift, you can get it absolutely free at artificialintelligencepod.com/gift or at the link right below this episode. Make sure to grab your copy before it goes back up to full price. Are you tired of dealing with your boss? Do you feel underpaid and underappreciated? If you want to make it online, fire your boss, and start living your retirement dreams now, then you come to the right place. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast Show, where you will learn how to use artificial intelligence to open new revenue streams and make money while you sleep. Presented live from a tropical island in the South Pacific by best-selling author Jonathan Green. Now, here's your host. Today we have a very special guest, the founder of Storytime AI, and I'm very interested in this tool. Very rarely do I start with the name of the tool at the beginning because I've been using it with my kids for the past week. And it's very simple. You get to write a story with the kids that's somewhere between 1 and 5 minutes in length. And they get to choose the characters, the setting, the location, all sorts of things. And I was really curious to see if my kids would like it, because it doesn't matter if I like it, because it's not for me. And that's an important lesson to remember every time I watch a movie with my kids. I don't like what they're watching. It's so boring, but they don't like the cartoons from when I was a kid. So I'd love to just get from the beginning, explain the concept and where the vision came from, and then we'll dive into my experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Jonathan. I appreciate your taking the time to have me on your show. Yeah, the concept first came out. I've always been involved in education technology. Former teacher, spent a couple of years teaching overseas in the island nation of Vanuatu in the South Pacific, and came back, did a little bit of work in the school system before I switched over in education technology. Worked for a larger education technology corporation, which eventually led me to starting my own business, which was online education, and I've always been involved in that field. My last business had an exit to a group called Learning Technologies Group, took some time off at the right time, had a nice break, and then the AI craze started. So the first question was, what is this going to have in terms of value? Where's the good going to come, the impact going to come for education specifically? And landed on a number of different themes that we saw that were going to be really interesting. And one of them was representation and inclusivity and content, which has always been lacking. We looked at first, what are the AI models doing right now versus where they're going to be maybe a year from now? And that was why we started with short stories for a younger audience. Aspirations are certainly, and roadmap has us going into longer text as we evolve. And we're starting to work on that as well. But for right now, we wanted highly illustrated books. So that's really what also was part of the genesis for why we started Storytime, was because we wanted to take the best image model options that we had with the best that we could do at the time, which was, and we started this a year ago, which was a shorter story, put those two together into an app.
So I guess my question is, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Is it kids getting excited to create their own stories? Is it kids learning to read? Is it kids spending more time with their parents? I'm trying to understand. So then I'll direct my questions, because this is the first thing I was trying to figure out from the app, and I wasn't quite sure. Right. It fills a couple of different niches, but what's the ideal goal? What's the ideal result?
Yeah, it's shifted. It's a great question. The original goal was, like you said, was bedtime stories. It was, okay, let's have this as a way for parents to have an easy way to create a bedtime story that would be interesting. We quickly pivoted and realized there was a lot of other things that it started to solve. I'll start with one of the more unique use cases that we had not thought of that came out right away, which was for children with special needs and neurodiverse populations specifically. We got picked up by a number of different teachers in special education where they were using this for social stories, which is a big part of the IEPs, the individual education plans for children with special needs, where they're going into a social situation and they're maybe nervous about it or it's new to them. So you build a story with them as the main character in that story, and then you show them what it's going to be like. We're going to go on a field trip next week. Here's what you can expect. Here's what you need to be aware of. Here's what you need to do to be ready for it. And that puts the student at ease. There's other use cases. I think that's one that emerged. We're finding multilingual parents are a really good use case. You're Indian American and you want to keep Hindi in the home, but there aren't good materials. And you can do this now where you create a personal story about your kid in Hindi at a young age. So they're starting to see themselves in story for that specific language. But I think the main use case that we're looking at is representation in books matters. If you see yourself as a doctor as a young kid, you become a doctor. So seeing someone that looks like you in the story, that's a big part of engaging and the young reader in wanting to not just read more, but start to see themselves in specific roles that they might not always have that type of a book in front of them. So it's easy access to that.
It's interesting to me. My kids are multiracial. They speak multiple languages, and they did ask. Of course, nobody has, their language, their native dialect is very obscure. So it's not in there yet, but maybe someday it's like the 500th most popular language. So it's very far down the list. But that was the first thing they were thinking about. And I was like, you guys speak 4 languages, use the other 3. The other 3 are in there. So that is very interesting to me. I think that when I was playing with the toy with my kids, the experience was the first thing they quickly wanted to start putting themselves in the story. So the first time they did a story, my son did a story about a girl. So it wasn't about him at all. It was a very different story. But then after that, every story was about us. And we tried a lot of different ideas. And I guess that's what I was wondering about with learning to read, because they quickly switched to the video element, which seems to be where it's the direction it's moving into, which is video stories, which is a different solve where they want to create the story. And then it's hard to get kids to read, my kids and me as a kid, to read a book over and over again. You might read the same book 2 or 3 times between childhood and 18, whereas they'll watch the same movie over and over and over and over again. So they watch the videos over again. And then, of course, they wanted to start making stories about each other because that's how they play the game. And I was like, wait a minute, guys, let's pull back from that. That's the escalation, which they wanted to try, which is where they would start writing stories about each other and including the names of their crushes and silly stuff like that. I was like, guys, I love the idea, but they were interested enough to want to go in that direction, and they would watch the videos over and over again. And I did find that for us, at least, the shorter story was the sweet spot. So the original story size, which is about 2.5 minutes, that worked perfectly. And I always think about when I shoot videos of my kids, doing a video when I'm holding it feels like it's forever. And then I get home and it's 19 seconds. Holding the camera for 5 minutes, I just can't do that. So my first question is about the guide rails. So we pushed against it. So in the second or third story, we had a boy with his golden retriever solve a murder mystery on a train. I was like, let's do the Orient Express. My kids are like, what's that? I said, classic Agatha Christie. I'm sure you guys are fans. So they did solve the murder, which was amazing, but it didn't show the murder. So the images had a rail, which was fine. I was like, I don't need to see it. But they were like, wow, this is very exciting. And that's how far we were able to push it. We weren't able to get past that. But I would rather test that with the kids than they do it when I'm not there, because they're going to try stuff like that. And it was very interesting to see, because I'm like, how graphic is it going to get? And it didn't go beyond, there was a murder in the room, we have to solve it. So when you're creating the rails, I guess that's what I really want to, how do you determine what the line is going to be? I know there's strategies of we're going to ban this word, but there's always a way around that. So right. How do you handle that with, 1, kids creating malicious stories about each other, and 2, creating stories that are like more extreme?
Yep. Yeah. First of all, fascinating to hear the trajectory of what your kids were doing and what they wanted to see. The video element it came out of user feedback because parents also wanted to have the ability to create a playlist. And we have playlists in there, I'm sure you saw, where they can create an hour's worth of personalized edutainment that they've added. And then kids would want to watch that over and over again, is just what we saw. So that's interesting. As far as the guardrails, I'm very glad to hear that's what the outcome was. We put a number of, obviously, like you said, filters when it comes to banned words and things like that, and that can only take you so far. So the next layer that we have above that are image classifiers, where it will, if something comes back for some reason and it's suspect, it will stop that from coming back. And it may ask you to recreate the image. You may have gotten an image not available, recreate it, and it tries to make sure that nothing comes through. Over time, as we go to older audiences, we will obviously not have the same guardrails. But as of right now, there's multiple layers, and it's obviously very important for us to ensure that's not going to be something that comes across. There are ways we can train the image models. I know that's something that we've talked about. So we're also pretty careful trying to make sure that the image models that we've used have been trained on images that we would find safe.
Yeah, I'm definitely more worried about an inappropriate image than I am about inappropriate language. An image, I still remember the first time I saw something in a movie I shouldn't have 40 years ago. That sticks with
Oh,
you way
yeah.
longer than something like language. The next question I have, I was thinking about this a lot, is the stories are descriptive rather than action based. So it will say, oh, she went on an adventure and saved her friend and they had an amazing adventure, but it doesn't say what actually happened in as much detail. And I
Yep.
wonder if that's because it's for younger children, if that's intentional, or if that's more a limitation of the language model and what your approach is going to be going forward. Because I just think about that as far as replayability or longevity.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. There's no doubt that it needs to be robust it's partly a limitation for where we started with the language models. We're in the back end, we're testing some different language models already that are having significantly better results for adding dialogue. For example, you're not going to see a lot of dialogue right now in the initial iteration, but we're changing that here over the next month or two. And we may even get to a spot where we offer you the option to pick between different models, or if you pick mystery versus if you pick action, it might in the back end be routing it to a specific model based on which one writes better for a specific objective. There is opportunity for us to train our own models on different data sets for specific instances. We haven't gotten there yet, but it is something that we do look at and we do have on the roadmap as a strong possibility.
Yeah, because what I was thinking about is the replayability of how many times will my kids rewatch the same video or re-engage with the same story and what they're drawn to. And obviously my calibration of what's interesting is not the same as theirs. So I let them really dive into the app and they were playing each other's videos and go, look, there's a story about me. And my youngest daughter who wasn't there was like, hey, where's the story about me? And so we make one about her. And so they each want to be involved. So they're definitely all feeling that pull. So it was working in that way. So it wasn't a negative. It was just like, oh, when something works, I want to build on it. The element that I really wanted, which we talked about last week in the pre-interview, was I would love for it to, this is me, less the video and more their text has a bouncing ball and they can read along with the book. That's really the element that I want because I'm trying to get them engaged with reading. What I don't want to accidentally do is create another just video app. So I want something
Yep.
where they're heavily invested in the reading element, but of course they prefer the video like they always do. So that's a challenge I face as a parent as well, which is they need to learn how to read. That's a pretty important skill. And it's where we always struggle because it's hard to get them engaged.
Yep. Yeah. So we started where we added the read along. That's called speech marks. And we added that on the video first. We're moving that into the book side next. But at the end of the day, it is a challenge because we're finding the same thing. It's why we added the video component. And it also was what parents asked us for. They wanted the ability to set it and forget it. They wanted to give their phone to their kid while they're at dinner or making dinner and with friends, and they don't want to be bothered. So there's an element of how do we get guilt-free screen time? That concept came up quite a bit. And they're saying, listen, it's not perfect in the sense that we're giving the phone to our kid and we're having to mitigate a certain amount of screen time. But at the same time, it's significantly better than the alternatives that they were currently having their kid look at videos that might be on YouTube that are obnoxious or maybe promoting the wrong values. So they could at least control what the message, because you saw when you're in there, you can insert themes. So if I want to insert friendship with my brother as opposed to what they're seeing on YouTube, it at least is a little bit more healthy. And you do have the reading element at the bottom of the movies. Are they watching and reading as it goes through? I'm not sure that's the case yet, but at least it is enforcing that concept of reading and creating your own books and imagination.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm not like that at all with my kids. That's not my approach to the phone. I don't use it to silence them. I'm very involved. Like I'm with them all the time when they're using it. It's the only time I've ever let them use my phone.
Yep.
So I'm a super engaged parent, which unfortunately, because I can work from home. So I understand why parents want something where they can give and not be nervous. Because I certainly know there's issues with YouTube security. I know there's issues with iPhones the parental controls on Apple don't actually work, but they haven't told anyone. They've been broken for 4 years. So you can set screen
Yep.
limits and app limits. And they don't work. They just turn off on your iPad after a couple of days. And Apple doesn't tell you. There's so many forums about that. So that's something that really bothered me when my kids started to break through all the limits I'd put on the iPad. I go, what happened here? Because I have educational games and stuff they're not supposed to be looking at. And they broke through and I found out that really bothered me. So I understand the desire to put something safe. And it's like you're caught between these two goals, which is I want to give you something educational, but I also want to give you something that's entertaining. And that's a very narrow road to walk. What do you think is the longevity. I guess I was looking at the pricing model, which is you get, I think, 10 credits per month for a certain price. And if I'm making a video, that means I can do 5 stories plus video, which is about 12 to 15 minutes of content based on the average story length is around 2.5 minutes when we tested. So if I can only make 15 minutes of content per month, it's going to take me 4 months to be able to make an hour's worth of content. And I wonder about replayability. What's your experience been with that of kids coming back, staying with the app longer, actually continue to use it a year later? Because those are the hardest things with any app.
Yeah, we've only been out the door here about 5 months since we launched the app, and we stayed pretty much in stealth mode, no marketing to date. We're just getting started with that so we can get user feedback. So we don't have a lot of data, but we are seeing that kids come back and watch the same videos over and over again. You do have the ability to buy extra credit bundles, right? So we're in this balance with trying to find, because we do have costs, right? We have the inference of creating the images each time. So we're having to try to get to a spot where we're going to be able to cover the operating costs with the pricing model. And I think that the good news there is those prices will come down very much over the next year. We're just trying to get it a little bit above break even for right now for us as we push the pricing down with the image and the text models over the next 12 months. But what we're finding is a lot of people are buying extra credit bundles. So we're trying to make it as accessible for everyone as possible. So for example, we have competitors out there like Epic, and you and I talked about Epic here offline. They have a library of books and no videos, or I don't believe they have videos yet, books only. And they're limited in languages, and it's $70 a year for access to that library. We're going to have our library fully free with hundreds of thousands of books and videos. And currently we have 22 languages. We'll be building to 74 this month, and that's free there. So the only cost that we have is if you want to build a personalized story, and that comes out to about, depending on what model you look at, about 30 cents a book. So if somebody wants to go above and beyond the 10 credits, then there is obviously the ability to buy bundles at prices that are, we think, very affordable compared to traditional options.
I certainly didn't think that the pricing was unreasonable considering what similar tools that I use to create videos for adults charge. Yep. That make a short form video that's 30 seconds and they all do credit systems, so you can't figure out what they're charging. But I looked and did the numbers. They're all significantly more expensive. So I didn't think it was on a reasonable price point. And that is a hard needle to thread because a lot of people will, if it's at a certain price, they'll just go, oh, I can just figure out how to do this on my own with an AI tool, which is a real hassle. I use AI a lot. I'm like, well, I don't want to do this myself. It'd be an hour for me to replicate the process and create each image because you have to render images one by one and then put them together the story. I'm like, it's not an easy process. So I use an automation tool for that reason. So I definitely found it interesting. I think that you are entering an interesting market and it's trying to go in a positive direction for AI, which is why I wanted to shine a light on this tool. So my kids did like playing with this. We'll continue over the following weeks to see what's possible, to see if they stick with it and keep wanting to play with it, because that's really, I can get them to play with anything once or twice. So that's really going to be the test of time. So I'll definitely follow up with this interview in the future. But thank you so much for being here. Where's the best place for people to check out your app, find out what you're doing, and connect with you if they have more questions and want to see what's going to happen next for Storytime?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate you having me on today. The best place to find me and find Storytime is find us at storytimeaiapp.com. And there's a download link there, and that will get you in, get you a couple free credits. And feel free to ping us on socials, and anyone who's out there who wants to test in your audience, we're happy to add some free months of credits in there for them. So just ping us on socials and we'll set you up with that.
And we'll put all the links below the video version and in the show notes if you listen to the audio version. Thank you everyone for being here and listening to another amazing episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast.
Thanks again, Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Starting with AI can be scary. ChatGPT Profits is not only a bestseller, but also the missing instruction manual to make mastering ChatGPT a breeze. Bypass the hard stuff and get straight to success with ChatGPT Profits. As always, I would love for you to support the show by paying full price on Amazon. But you can get it absolutely free for a limited time at artificialintelligencepod.com/gift. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. We'll be back next Monday with more tips and tactics on how to leverage AI to escape that rat race. Head over to artificialintelligencepod.com now to see past episodes, leave a review, and check out all of our socials.